So I'll go ahead and get started. Hopefully you're here for the making of a web team. For the record, this is not a seriously technical presentation. This is much more of that feel-good, management-y tools kind of presentation. So hopefully that doesn't make all of you leave all at once, but ideally there's going to be something here that you're going to find useful. Also, I'm getting over a cold like apparently all of the other presenters, so I apologize if I break into a coughing fit. I'll do my best. And again, check out the polls because there's a couple questions in here that hopefully will be useful. I've done this presentation once before at High Ed Web, and in my experience, there's a lot of people out there who are trying to get positions. So I feel like hopefully this is going to be something that's useful to a lot of people. So without further ado, my name is Jen Reilly McFarland. You can just stick with the McFarland. NCSU Merit is my Twitter handle, and OIT Design is the Twitter handle for our team, which I'll talk about as we go. And they're far more interactive than I am, including Brian. So you want to write to them first, probably. This presentation, as I said, is going to not be very technical. We're going to focus on sort of a little bit of our history, who we are, how we got to this point, why this turned into a thing that I felt like I needed to talk about because we've really been through some experiences here. And then we're going to talk a lot about the types of tools that we use to help improve our team dynamic and how we get work done day to day. And I am totally open for advice as we go too, and at the end, and I'll be happy to answer questions about why we use our various tools and things like that. Again, because I'm going to talk about tools, I want to be clear, I'm not endorsing anything specifically. You should use what works for you. And no one is paying us to say anything nice about any of these tools. I also really like to use stormtroopers to make my point, so you're going to see a lot of them. So I assume the Disney people are on board with that. So a little bit of history here. In September of 2014, it was just me, that sad little stormtrooper all by themselves. And this is the story of how a year later, we took a look around and our staff had turned into 3 full-timers, and we had 3 interns and another part-time staff person. So we had a pretty significant influx of staff, which is great, wonderful, very exciting. I'm going to tell you how we did that. But we had obviously some growing pains. So those are sort of some of the things we're going to talk about here. Me, very quickly, I like Star Wars. I work at NC State. I started in the help desk like a few years ago. And so I've been around campus and I've seen a lot. So a little bit about our campus. We're located in Raleigh, North Carolina. We are the largest employer in the state. There's a bunch of people who work for NC State, whether it be at our Central College, our Centennial campus, any of our remote campuses. So we're a pretty massive school. At last count, almost 35,000 students. And with that, of course, comes the inevitable issues of the fact that we have a lot of fiefdoms. So that's a pretty significant issue. This is a map of kind of what our client load looks like. Specifically, this is a lot of the Keith can't see anything. Hopefully, Keith, you can hear something, and Eric can try to help you out with that. So this is a slide that's talking about what our WordPress environment looks like. And to start off with, we have 2 really large multi-site environments. One is our free environment that students and faculty and staff can use for free, our blog environment. The other one is our premium hosted environment. And that costs about $300 a year and lets people use their own domain, not that dissimilarly from WordPress.com, for example. It also lets them have some choice, more choice and freedom over the themes and plugins that they have available. So it has a lot more oversight from our office. And then we have clients from all over campus. We are in the Office of Information Technology, but we work with a bunch of other units. You can see the alphabet soup of acronyms there. The Office of Research, Innovation, and Economic Development, Division of Academic and Student Affairs, Office of Finance and Administration, and HR. And then there's a bunch of other multi-sites that we help to support. And then we have a whole bunch of standalone installs, whether they be a single WordPress install or a very small multi-site Anytime we have 2 or 3 sites within a group, we'll try to put those in a multi-site together to save us some time. I remember I was in Lacey's session this morning, hopefully a lot of you were too, and she called them a bunch of little countries. She also said that they only have 17 standalone sites now, which I think is amazing and admirable. We'd love to see that day. So a little bit about our unit specifically. Part of the reason why I ask folks where they're from is that in my experience that really does impact your support, how you go about helping people, and then the types of clients that you work with, how easy it is for you to get money. There's a whole lot of things that play into that. So our office is housed in central IT. Central communications is the other usually big source of people working in with WordPress or working in websites in IT or at universities. And then we have, I can see from the poll, a lot of other people in colleges and departments. So yeah. Because we're in central IT, the major WordPress multi-sites are out of our office. And for the record, we're actually in the process of potentially moving into another multi-site environment that's just for student orgs. That's something that we're talking about doing. So if anybody has experience with that, we'd be curious to hear about it. We build custom WordPress themes and plugins for general use for campus, partially because we are somewhat subsidized by central IT, so we like to try to make resources available to the rest of campus as much as we can. But we do custom design, development, and support, as well as training for all of our campus. So that is a heavy load. Excuse me. I'm going to try and circle back to some of these questions. But for now, I'm just going to run through the position information a little bit. We got WordPress on our campus back in 2009. Or actually, that was the first we started with web hosting. So we had a cPanel environment that people could sign up for, and that was brand new for us. And what we found was that there were a lot of people who created sites and didn't necessarily know what to do with them, didn't know enough about WordPress or Drupal. Because you could install either in our web hosting service, and they needed some help. A little bit more background on NC State. We have both a College of Design and we have an engineering college which has computer science. And we have undergrad and master's degrees for both. And so you can imagine we have a lot of people on campus who want to make a website and feel like they can do it themselves. So we have a really hard time directing people into managed environments. That being said, we decided in 2012 that we would try to create managed environments for both Drupal and WordPress. So that's where we got our blog environment and hosted environment. And at the time, we had a hosted service for Drupal as well as WordPress. Now, about a year later, Nick, there were just 2 of us in the office. I did WordPress stuff and Nick did Drupal stuff. And in July of 2013, about a year in, Nick left. And so here we are. It's just me doing the WordPress stuff and the Drupal stuff. So it was stressful. I really wanted us to get to solidify on one platform. As you can imagine, it was really hard to have the 2 separate platforms, and I knew that that wasn't the best use of our resources. But unfortunately, we went through the process of hiring another Drupal person, and then sure enough, a year later, that Drupal person left. And so fortunately, at that point, I was able to go to my boss and say, look, we really need to pick a platform, and I'm the one who's still here, so WordPress wins. That's kind of how it got decided. So unfortunately, it took about 3 months for us to re-rate the position from a Drupal position to a WordPress position and then hire it. And so, you know, it's all this time, I'm the only person who's around supporting both WordPress and Drupal. And that sort of brings us up to October 2014. Now, at the beginning of October, I actually went to High Ed Web for the first time. If you haven't had the experience, High Ed Web is a great opportunity to learn about higher education webs generally. There's always WordPress representation there as well, so you can certainly get a lot more out of that. And they have a couple of different academies available, including the Leadership Academy. And so I happened to take it in October of 2014 and got some great ideas and suggestions out of that. And it was really timely because while I was busy doing Hired Web, Brian, our new person, amazing, we were hiring a WordPress person, came in at the same time. And that's Brian, everybody. Brian said hey on the chat. He's in here as our moderator, and so you should be sure to make fun of him and ask him questions. The really hard questions, save those for Brian. Anyway, so lo and behold, I get back from Hired Web and I have all this, thoughts and ideas and experience with not experience, but ideas about leadership and how it should look. And now I have a guy. There's two of us, two WordPress people. It's amazing. It was so good. Brian could say something on here about how good it was, but he didn't know how bad it was before. And so right off the bat, early on, we wanted to take some time to, shut up, Brian, to start by trying to consolidate our different environments, trying to move people who were in Drupal over to WordPress, trying to get some consistency to the themes and the training and the different tools that we were using. Brian and I initially didn't worry too much about trying to collaborate. His office is right across the hall from mine. Even now, he can probably hear me talking to you guys. And so it was a lot of, effort to just kind of get a hold of things and try to put it all in one place. Oops, excuse me. So as we're going through that fall, we're, pushing our Drupal users into WordPress, trying to consolidate things. We had a bunch of new clients coming in, including our DASA environment. So DASA was coming from a whole disparate set of different environments, and we were moving them into one single multi-site with a single theme, and that was obviously a major project. We also had the NC State Campus brand update, came out in summer to fall of 2014, so we didn't have enough going on, we were working on that. And we were trying to push out the OIT website, our central IT website. So we were definitely keeping busy, and we knew that we had work, just waiting for us, lined up, and that we could absolutely hire another person in a second to help us out. I think a lot of us have this issue where we have clients, whether they're banging down our door or waiting, waiting in emails, and you're telling them, hey, we'll get back to you in a month or two. Or if it's just kind of rolling in with time, people are telling other people about you and what you can do. That there's a need to improve sites on your campus, and that you could do it if you could just, have another person help out with that. But we all have this issue of trying to get positions in an era of hiring freezes and budget cuts. So this was our challenge, and we tried to address this in a couple of different ways. The first way is we started, yes, people know the feeling, thank you. The first way was for us to get interns. Now, I will go ahead and tell you this was not my first choice in terms of how to deal with this issue. Our CIO seems to like to point to part-time staff as an answer for us, and a lot of times, and I probably don't have to preach this to you guys, but part-time staff is not always the answer. They may not have the experience, they may not have access to the files they're supposed to have. You may not want to give them access to the things that they need in order to support the clients. So there's a lot of issues with interns, not the least of which is training. And we had some challenges with this because we had some folks in another college, faculty, saying that they wanted to collaborate with us and give us some staff. And of course, our management was like, great, yeah, we need the staff. You guys are always saying you need people. Here are people. But they also wanted us to train them. Specifically, they really wanted us to provide in-depth training for those students. And that was a lot of overhead for us. So initially, especially, it was very much a source of frustration that this was seen as a solution for our staffing when, from my perspective, it was just a lot more work on our part to get those people on board. So our second sort of quote-unquote solution was leverage. And as fate would have it, in the spring of 2015, I got offered a job at one of our competing institutions. I definitely thought about going. There were some really attractive parts to that, But in the end, I really wanted to stay. I mean, I'd had all this time and energy into getting NC State to this point, and I felt like we'd come a long way. And I really wanted to see us get to that next level. And from my perspective, at that point, I already felt like we'd come a long way. Of course, sitting here now, I feel like we had so much farther to go. But this was an important step because by saying, you know, hey, I have this opportunity, these people are doing it right, and I really want us to do it right. Help me do this right. They came through with 3/4 of a position for us to hire. So that was great. I mean, that was amazing. That isn't a full-time job, but that's 3/4 of the way to having another person available to us. And that's a lot more than just having interns around. So I was excited about that, and ultimately I decided to stay at NC State, and I'm glad I did, because otherwise I wouldn't be giving you this presentation. I'd be giving you a very different presentation with different colors. All right, so the next step beyond that was to take that 3/4 of a position, and I knew that I did not really want to hire 3/4 of a position. I wanted to hire a full-time position. And the way that you do that is to find somebody else on campus who is going to want to work with you. And we had some great timing with respect to this. We got 1/4 of a position from a group that we weren't working with at the time, but really needed the help. And so it was amazing that that worked out. The timing really worked great. And we created a position where 1/4 of that time was funded by the Office of Research, Innovation, and Economic Development. And more on that in a second. That has been fantastic for us, and is certainly something that has also benefited them, I think, which is, I mean, it is ultimately 100% win-win situation. So that position lives, quote unquote, in our unit and reports to me. And they have been the primary lead person for the OIRAD projects. However, all of us contribute to it. So both Brian, myself, and then this third position, excuse me, all of us were able to answer questions and be available and do training for these folks. And then we also were able to bring in the person who was doing web stuff for OIRAD, or who is doing web stuff for OIRAD. And so we're able to really keep communication and collaboration between the groups going all the time. We actually meet with them at least every other week, if not every week, for about half an hour to an hour. So we really try to keep those lines of connection open a great deal. And so in the fall of 2015, we got Chris. And Chris is on here too. Everybody wave at Chris. Hey, Chris. It's very nice of you guys, because you actually have the same images on your nerdy little things here. So that's great. You can recognize Chris and Brian from the pictures. So at this point, we have 3 people. Can you believe that? I mean, I can't believe it. In about a year, we went to hiring those 3 part-timers, or 3 interns. We actually had another part-timer who we kind of had, occasionally we had that part-time position filled, but we officially had somebody on board as of September of 2015. He's actually still with us now and is amazing. He's a grad student. And then we had the 3 full-timers, Chris and Brian and I. So we kind of blew up in a good way, but we kind of blew up. And all the things that I used to do, like shout at Brian across the hall and say, hey, Brian, where are we at with this project? Yeah, not really working so much anymore. So again, one of the things that we had to worry about, or to deal with, to adjust to, was the interns. And specifically, as I sort of alluded to before, the college where we were getting our interns from was really expecting us to do a lot of training for them. And with that in mind, we had to fill in the gaps of some of the training to be a little bit more official, so that we could point to this sort of curriculum, quote unquote, for the interns as a way that we were fulfilling our requirements with them in order to continue using them. And so to that end, we started an intern program. This is just the first year. We kind of have it built out for 2 years, with the idea that if we have an intern who's with us for more than 2 years, first of all, great, but we haven't had that happen. But second of all, that at that point, hopefully they'll be contributing back to the intern program, to the rest of this curriculum, and hopefully helping to teach on it. When they start, we obviously do some introduction to NC State in general and our web environment, branding. Our cybersecurity awareness month is in October, so you can start to see where a lot of this stuff ties back to the way that our campus runs things. Like we have another security month in February usually, so that's another time that we focus on security. We started coming up with curriculum content. For example, WordPress security class, we came up with that back when the interns first started with us in 2015 and 16. And we actually now moved that into a WordPress security class that we offer campus. So in some cases, some of this training, we sort of built it up some more, and then we're starting to make this something that's more widely available that the rest of campus can use. Accessibility and usability, we have an accessibility officer out of our office, and actually there's another intern that reports to her, so we usually have the accessibility intern come to our training as well, which is another nice way to create those connections and make sure that the interns are talking to each other and learning from each other. And then we try to focus on documentation. Now, people are saying, hey, this is great. And yes, it is. But I should also say, this doesn't always go to plan. Definitely, we try to do training once a month. We don't always achieve that. Some months are harder than others. Getting the intern schedules to line up is super hard. For us right now, we're actually waiting on one of our interns to come back in February. So we didn't do training this month in January. But usually this is something that we've been trying to keep doing. And now moving into a new year, I'll come back to this later, but we actually have someone who's going to teach on InDesign for our interns because that was something that the interns requested. So it's not on here, but we try to fill in the gaps where there are things that the interns really wanted to learn more about. So it's a pretty elaborate process. I've actually never heard back from the college that initially requested this. But that said, I think that they've learned a lot and that everybody pretty much feels like this has been worthwhile, if only just to get the information together that we can make available to them or make available to the rest of campus. I spent a lot of time on that, sorry. Team building. So yeah, we had a whole bunch of new people who really didn't know each other. Brian and I knew each other, but that was about it. And so we wanted to try to bring everyone together in a more casual setting. And with that in mind, we've had team building, quote unquote, which is really just hanging out outside the office. We try to do that at least once a month too. And I'm sure Chris is going to jump in here and say, we don't do that once a month. We try to do it once a month. And we do okay. We had stuff going on, of course, we would love to adopt you, Josh. We had stuff going on in December, of course, for the holidays. We didn't have anything going on in January, but we are trying to go to the NC State-UNC hockey game coming up in 2 weeks in the beginning of February. So there's different stuff that we do. FRISBEE golf, by the way, Chris is terrible at FRISBEE golf. Bowling, and we went to the Hurricanes hockey game, so that was great. So I think that's been really nice. We've appreciated that time to get to know each other. And obviously by the way we're teasing each other on here, hopefully you guys are getting the impression that we get along pretty well. I'm throwing this in here, even though it's not team building for us specifically. But again, as I've mentioned, NC State is extremely decentralized, and we have web people all over campus. In addition to our group in Central IT, there are web folks in Central Communications at NC State, and then a lot of the different colleges, especially the College of Engineering, have their own developers and designers. And so one of the things that we came up with years ago, that this is not something that we've done in the last year or so, is co-working. And on Fridays, we get together in a centralized space on campus, which sometimes floats. And mostly we do our work in that space. And then when we have projects that we might be able to collaborate on or that we want to let other people know about, we'll sort of, grab other people or do a presentation and show people stuff about it. We now have a Slack channel, so that's another place where we communicate some of the things that we're working on to try to bring people in if they find that it's something that's useful. So co-working has been great. Something that we did add in the last year or so is office hours. And that's because at this point, we support so many sites on campus. And we also support sites that aren't necessarily quote unquote ours. So if people have a question about WordPress, we're not going to throw them out. We're Central IT, we host the NC State Help Desk. So if someone has a question and they need help with it, it's going to wind up on our desks one way or the other. So office hours is a time that we're available for 3 hours on Fridays, and anybody can come by. Sorry, campus does not float. We are not that floaty. But yes, our office hours sometimes change locations, but usually we're in one place. And folks can come by and ask us questions about whatever. Even if it's not a site that we manage, we'll look over their shoulder and try and answer questions. Okay, so the real issue with all these people was, how do we get this information to everyone? How do we document things in a way that's useful, not just for now, but for the long term, that's useful for the interns, all that kind of stuff. The whole, again, process of shouting it across the hall to Brian doesn't really hold up when there's another person in an office around the corner, although I shout really loud. So, I mean, it probably could have worked. Anyway, but things that we want to share, like meeting notes, the information about, the clients, not only who they are, but then what their websites are, and shut up, Brian, and all that other stuff. When we have incoming help requests, we wanted to make sure that one of us was answering and that we knew who. If we come across a problem, we want to make sure everybody knows about it, including the interns. So all that kind of stuff was important, and we needed a good way to communicate it. And probably some of you are already anticipating where I'm going with this. Slack showed up on the scene at just the right time for us, because Slack really solved a lot of those problems. Not all of them, but a whole lot of them. So we started using Slack, I have this written down somewhere, pretty early on, about March of 2015. So really even before we had all the staff onboarded, well before we had the staff even hired. But we needed the time to, WPCampus is on Slack as well. Just thank you for the shout out. But this was a time for us to really jump into it. You can kind of see from the screenshot that we actually went to High Web that year, and I got a bunch of ideas from High Web about good ways to organize our, I think that might have been Lacey actually who presented on that, I can't remember. But our channels are prefixed based on, is this something that we work on? Is this something that is a client? Is this something that's plugin development or theme development? And then we have the quote unquote X channels that are just us being stupid. So we use Slack a whole bunch. You can see here, this is just a quick look at some of our integrations. We use GitHub a great deal for our all of our repositories, and I can talk more about that if people are interested in how we deploy our stuff. But we obviously use Google Calendar, Google Drive, or Google Campus, which is great. So that really helps us with sharing and communicating. Asana, I'll come back to that in a second. And then a couple of other integrations that use some scripts to give us information about our various tools, or to go back to our servers and run some processes to do some things. So there's, again, we're happy to answer details on what we use these for, but we have been really filled with Slack. Can't say enough about it. We are paying for it. Decided to do that probably 6 months or so after we got on Slack. And just as a reminder, if you're not aware, there's like a 70-some-odd% discount for EDUs to use Slack, so it's super worth it. It comes out to like $50 or so a year for us, and we have 7 or 8 people on there all the time, so it's been hugely beneficial. Again, I'm not being paid by Slack. Our campus also uses ServiceNow, which is a call tracking tool if you're not familiar with it. This is, again, a whole campus tool, and there's plenty of overhead in terms of cost for this. And ServiceNow is something that was also coming out in 2015, around the same time that we were sort of growing in size and scope. But at this point, we have, I think, 3 different service groups where our content might come into us. One is any kind of WordPress question might come in. We also have a channel for sort of our higher end web services questions, because in addition to other work, we also answer generic questions for people who are running their own standalone WordPress environments. And then we're trying to get all of our client requests into ServiceNow too, just for the purposes of tracking, and then ideally adding some assessment to this. So there's a lot of stuff coming in and out of ServiceNow. The nice thing is it ties back to Slack, right? So there's a couple of tools that you can use to drop messages in Slack. You can see in this sort of screenshot here that Brian is popping in here with a question related to that call specifically. So it's really helpful for us to use Slack to say, hey, this call came in from our client, I'm going to tackle this one. Or can somebody else help them with this? Or, hey, you know what, I saw this person in office hours and they asked this question and this is what they really mean. So a lot of that communication and clarification has been facilitated both by ServiceNow and by Slack. Yeah, so again, we use GitHub. We have a campus enterprise version of GitHub, and we use GitHub Updater, which is a plugin that's freely available out there if you want to look it up for updating our themes and plugins. So we can do our development and then use GitHub Updater to push this to our various sites. With that in mind, obviously, again, this ties back into Slack. There's GitHub integration, so whenever we're working on a theme or plugin, it's going to track that information for us. Let's see, there's a question here about ServiceNow as project requests. No, we don't technically have a project request intake process at this point. We have a form on our website, but almost nobody uses that. So most of the time, our project requests come in as an email, either a generic email that goes to the help desk and somebody says, hey, I need help with this, or we get questions from existing clients or someone who knows an existing client and they email our client email address. So that's usually how we start things off. So there's your just on GitHub. Again, because we're a Google campus, we have a whole lot of stuff in Google Drive. We keep a lot of our documentation in there for some of our accounts and resources and things like that. But we also keep notes in there from clients occasionally. All of our information about billing is handled through that. And we're really trying to move more and more things to Google Docs as we go, just because it's so useful for campus, it's so useful for sharing if people come or go. There's a lot of benefits to that. And of course, it ties back to Slack. So this is an example of David, our part-timer, taking notes from one of our meetings and sharing that out. And so that's all available in Slack and Google all the time if we need to go back and reference those things. Okay, so Asana, we're not really using that much anymore. And for the record, I know that I'm saying Asana wrong. Apparently it is a yoga term and it's pronounced in a different way, but I'm not really a big yoga person, so I don't remember how it's supposed to be pronounced, and I apologize if I'm offending anyone. I do like Asana. We like Asana very much. It is free, and so if you're in the market for some kind of project or tool or task management application, I definitely suggest checking it out. And occasionally we do still use it, particularly when we have large projects with a lot of tasks involved. We will make those lists of tasks and then assign them to our interns, because the interns can get in there really easily. They can check things off. They can make notes about the task. Asana is a great tool. Ultimately, it wasn't doing all the things that we wanted it to do, and so we were sort of floundering around for a better tool, which I'll come back to later. But it does also have integrations into Slack, which is kind of at this point our go-to. Like, if it doesn't work with Slack, we're kind of like over it. We're not going to spend any more time on you. But Asana is a really nice tool, but we've kind of slacked off, no pun intended, on that one. When we looked around, we found Wunderlist instead, which also ties into Slack, of course. And while it's not quite doing everything we want it to, I mean, ideally we would like to manage all of our, shut up, Brian. I've told you to shut up like 5 times, and I really apologize. I don't do this all the time to Brian. You guys should know that, okay? Yes, I did not mean that pun, and yes, we like Wunderlist. The nice thing, one of the things that we really like to do is we're not agile, but we do like to sort of check in every day and touch base on what's going on and what we're doing. And all of our task tools have tried to come back to this main goal of ours, which is to say, I want to find a better way of automating what I have to do today and putting it out there in Slack. And so we've always been trying to solve this problem, and Wunderlist hasn't really solved it for us either. We're still looking for something, but it does, again, allow us to have our interns in here, have us in there, have all of our different projects. At this point, you can't quite see from the screenshot, but we have the client and project and other channels or to-do lists, so to speak, that line up with our Slack channels. So when something happens in one and it outputs to Slack, those things are sort of tied together. And that's been nice. That's a kind of a benefit for us. And then there's some other things that are inherent to Wunderlist, like the starred functionality, so that you can really say, here are the things that are a priority. And, we sort of use that to say, here's what I'm working on right now. But we're still, I would say we're still kind of in the market for a task manager to-do list tool. And no, we have not used Jira. We don't really have a budget for any of this stuff. And I think they charge, but that's a good thing we can come back to. Basecamp is also eliminated for the same reason. So anyway, taking this back to Slack, you can sort of see from this screenshot, we got all kinds of junk dropped in here. So this is a channel from our plugin that's developing a shortcode plugin. And it has all kinds of stuff in here, from notes that Brian and Chris have, communications from Brian and Chris about how they're doing development, what they have to do next in Wunderlist, and then when they've done it in GitHub. So there's a lot of good stuff there. Okay, I'm running out of time, so I'm going to speed things along here. One of the things that we really wanted to improve on was our meetings. Again, we're not an agile group, but we wanted to try to set up a somewhat agile-y environment for our meetings. So to that end, we meet once a week, and that timing is scheduled to be 45 minutes. And I'm not going to say we always make the 45 minutes, but we always really strive to make the 45 minutes. And this is my office. It's where I'm sitting right now. And we have a whole bunch of chairs in here. I rearranged the space after we increased in size phenomenally, because we don't really have another good meeting space, especially in light of the fact that we wanted to try to have, you could see the boards and stuff, which I'll talk about in a second. We wanted to keep that stuff up all the time. So we didn't want to use a conference room. We wanted it to be a more dedicated and casual space. So the first rule of meetings is no technology. When you come in, you leave your phone and your laptop outside, at the door, in your office, whatever you need to do. All the stuff that we talk about, you're going to write it on a Post-it note, and we're going to put it up on the board, and we're going to run through those things. So that's the first rule. Actually, I should go back real quick and point out there's a Slinky in there. The Slinky is there to help facilitate this rule because, as Chris will tell you, it's really hard to stop looking at your phone. So the Slinky is that thing that you're supposed to use to have in your hands so that you're not looking at your phone all the time. And that has actually been really, really popular. I just had to buy a new bunch of Slinkies, in part because David is mean to Slinkies. Those things, they can knot up quickly. So we have Slinkies to distract us and keep our hands busy. And I mean, I would love to hear from Chris and Brian at this point. But I really feel like the no technology rule has worked out well for us and has helped us, sort of keep our eye on the prize, so to speak. So when you write something on a Post-it note, we put it up on the whiteboard. Stuff in the middle is the stuff that we need to deal with during that meeting. The stuff on the left is our action items. So things that we're supposed to do throughout the week. So as we address the things that are in the middle, if it's something that we can't solve right away, that one of us needs to take care of, that we need to address the next week, we put it over on the left. The stuff on the right got created because we kept coming up with things that we needed to do that weren't just going to take a week, that were big picture items. And that was kind of stressing us out, and it was stuff that we needed to shelve basically till later. And so ideas and issues is like the big picture stuff that we needed to hold off on. And then down at the bottom, we have our trash can / recycling bin, which I really prefer. And the thing is our weekly task that we are supposed to be taking care of, whether that be going through all of our sites and doing updates, going through all of our sites and updating analytics for them, going through all of our sites and checking on user access and trying to eliminate old users. We had a thing for everything. And unfortunately, we haven't done a great job with that. But we also have the client board, which is on the other side of the room. And this is our list of clients. In particular, we talk about the upcoming and current clients and where we're at with those. Hopefully, occasionally, we get to move some of these Post-it or some of these index cards over to either maintenance or one of the other areas, but this is one of those things that helps us sort of get a big picture of what's going on and what's coming. And then we also have our designated dissenter, and this came up very organically, but every week we assign somebody to be the designated dissenter, and that person is the person who has to disagree, basically. It's your job to come back when we have an idea or a suggestion, or devil's advocate, someone who is going to say, when you say, well, we're going to work on this project, this comes next, they say, why? Why is that the next project? And it sounds like that person's just a giant jerk, and they are. So, it's kind of fun to be the designated dissenter sometimes. But it's also that perspective that says, hey, I'm going to suggest that we do this thing that's really hard, but maybe is worthwhile. And a lot of times we found that person to give us kind of interesting perspective on things that we wouldn't have otherwise. We don't always listen to the designated dissenter, but it's worthwhile for trying to think outside the box and push ourselves. That's been good. I am way over time here, so let me bust through this really quickly. We did a retreat a couple of months ago, so about a year after everybody had been together, to try to assess where we were. We brought along, at least for part of the day, our collaborator from OIRAD, which is that quarter of a position that we have, and David, our part-timer. And among other things, we did a Myers-Briggs test, which, and this is interesting, told us that instead of, we're all N's, basically. So we all solve problems the same way, or we all attack things in the same way, which is sort of a big picture, try the latest, newest, coolest thing, and sort of gloss over some of the details. So all five of us are N's, and that means that none of us are looking at things by, working through the facts, looking at the bottom line, some of those solutions. And truthfully, you can see that in the fact that, for example, we have a whole column on the side that's just for the big ticket, big picture items that we want to do, right? We kept having this problem where we came up with big projects that we wanted to do, and obviously that was not facilitating us getting the annoying little thing of the week done at the bottom of the whiteboard. So that was very insightful, at least for me as the manager, for trying to get things done. So some of the goals that came out of our retreat was to improve our habits, to work more with the other units within our group, Office of Communications and Consulting, to keep working on developing new campus partnerships and training. And again, some of the stuff that we did for interns is stuff that we've turned into training for campus. And we wanted to continue to contribute to the WordPress community, so with things like WPCampus and our WordCamp, which is on campus. So as I mentioned before, we've added new training. We added a WordPress security class and now an intermediate WordPress class that we've just offered starting in December. We wanted to grow the WordPress community for campus and continue to improve the access of WordPress to the community, again, which was us trying to get WordCamp on campus and contribute back to WordCamp. And that worked out really well for us because we met some really good people when we went to WordCamp this past fall. So yes, quickly, obviously I don't really need to wave around WPCampus. You guys all know about it, so I can skip that slide, but you should continue to follow the community. We wanted to find new partnerships, and this is something that we're still actively working on, both by working with new groups and then also increasing our connection to existing groups. I'm going to run out of time. Bear with me, guys. And then trying to keep the big picture. So trying not to keep the big picture. So focusing on some of the details, even though that's hard for us because we're intuition instead of sensing. So the real news came because in September of 2016, of course, a year later, everything happens in September, right? Chris left. So Chris is dead to us. Yeah. Bye, Chris. RIP. Yeah. So that was, a wrinkle. We were kind of back to team building. We had to hire. We, this happened, of course, at the same time that I was presenting, by the way, this presentation to High Ed Web. So all the things that I was like, hey, look at us, we're a team, yeah, teams. And then, of course, Chris was gone, so thanks, Chris. So we went through the process of hiring, and we brought Miles on board. And Miles is on here too, I think, so Miles wave. And then the good news is Chris kind of solved our problem about working with OCC groups, because he worked, and Brian just gave it away, but he actually got hired into a group down the hall. So he's like literally like 20 feet away. He's gonna bust in here and shoot me with a Nerf gun. That's what we're looking at here. So he's working with our application development group. And the good news is we do get to work with them more. He knows how we do things. He's familiar with WordPress. And so, hopefully we can continue to use his expertise to do some development for us and work on new projects and approach things with a little bit more development. So it's not like we got a position out of Chris. That isn't how it worked out. But we did get a partner, a quote unquote partnership that we weren't expecting. So if you think positions and processes and planning are all it's going to take to get it done, you're so wrong. There's so much more. It's so much more complicated than that. I wish I could tell you that there was a magic bullet for fixing things and making things easier. I'm way oversimplifying this with 45 minutes here. But these are the things that got us through a year. It got us, some positions. It's helped us create some processes. It's helped us identify some of our weaknesses and, hopefully improve us, and hopefully we'll continue to improve. We're still working on creating new positions. That's always a priority for us. We're still working on creating new partnerships. That's always going to be a priority for us. And hopefully something in here has been useful to you. This is what we've gone through for the last year or two. We know that you're going through something else, but if any of this is useful to you, then it was not a waste of 47 minutes and 40 seconds. So that's the gist. I want to thank Stefan, who is the place where I got all my Flickr, my Stormtrooper pictures from Flickr. So there you go. And then my team, all of whom are on here. So if you say thank you right now, they'll all know how much you love them. So that would be great. And I'm going to answer some questions because I know you guys have them. I'm so sorry. Looks like we need to move those questions into the WP online channel. Oh, wait. Okay, I can answer a couple real quick. Yeah, we are partial cost recovery. So a couple of our positions, 1.5 of our positions are paid for. The rest, we need to come up with money. So this is, we don't charge, we charge like, I hesitate to say what we charge, but a brand new site is going to be less than $2,000. So we're nowhere in the neighborhood of like a vendor or anything else like that. Our stuff is incredibly cheap. The hosted WordPress environment that we support and maintain is like $300 for the year for a site in there. So we really keep it, tight. And so cost recovery is, at some point we might have to raise our rates if we actually legitimately want to get another position. That's always an option, but to me, that's a last ditch thing. We really don't want to do that unless we have no other options. Okay, so some more questions really quickly. Tips for showing the value of Slack to coworkers. I'm actually trying to get Slack for campus, all of campus. I know I've talked to the Slack salespeople about when they're going to make an enterprise version available and making us guinea pigs for that. The good news is, since we got on Slack, which again, like almost 3 years ago now, I guess, it's really increased on campus. And so one of the things we've done is, obviously we're on the WPCampus Slack channel, and we have been almost since the beginning. But we've also started up, there's a WordCamp Slack channel for people who work on our WordCamp, which is offered at least once a year in Raleigh. And then we also have an NC State IT people Slack channel and an NC State web developer Slack channel. So we have tried our best to make it ubiquitous for people to communicate. That said, Kim, who I mentioned before, who's our OIRAD contact, she has an account on here. Anytime she can jump in, but she almost never uses Slack. And it would be so beneficial for her to see some of the stuff that we talk about, but it's really hard to change habits. So I don't, making it available to people would be my best suggestion. But yeah, it's always going to be a challenge to try to figure out how to get people into that solution. Oops, back. So let's see, challenges came up in the migration from Drupal to WordPress. Lots of challenges. One that I can say is that we never moved to Drupal 7. So a lot of people naturally had to move to WordPress. So that sort of helped us funnel things. Our campus, again, super decentralized, but as it happened, there weren't that many Drupal developers on campus. And so while we had some tools like Drupal themes, 1 or 2, they weren't really getting updated, especially as the move to 7 went down and now 8. I mean, the problem with Drupal having to do such a massive migration between versions is that if you don't have the staff there to make that happen, it kind of ages itself out a little bit. And that really happened to us with WordPress. And it helped that we had some other units on campus, Central Communications especially, that was using WordPress already, and they came out with some themes in WordPress. And at this point, there's no mandate for campus that we use WordPress, but I know very few, if any, groups that are still using Drupal. And again, I invite my other people here, Brian and Miles and Chris, to contribute to that if they have questions. Google Docs, overwhelming piles of documents. Sure, yeah, there are a lot, especially because keep in mind that it's not just our documents, but it's all of the committees and groups that we're a part of. I don't think we have a problem with version control. And so, Google will do that, which is great. But generally speaking, that hasn't been a problem tracking. We use a lot of folders, we use a lot of subfolders, we use a lot of sharing, and in fact, we're trying to get all of our customers to use it too. We just launched the Policies, Rules, and Regulations site, a new website for campus. Kudos to Brian. And actually, all the campus regulations we're trying to keep in Google Drive. So we're really trying to create a culture that focuses on Google Drive as a solution, especially for things like access and revision history. And I'm way over time. So if you guys have any other questions, please drop them in the WPCampus online channel, WPC online, and I will be happy to answer them. And I know there's one at the bottom here about multi-site environments. So thanks, guys. Really appreciate your time. Please come in and offer us suggestions or questions. And I hope that this was helpful for you. Thanks. Bye.